It was nice to know that works, though. All right, start local. 3, 2, 1. All right. I've been watching a couple podcasts. There's something I want to do because I do see the benefit of it. After we do our clap check, and I'll let you know, we'll do a 10 seconds of silence. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to pick up everybody's room noise, and I can then take that out of the recording. So we'll do a clap check, and then I'll say 10 seconds of silence. Don't mute your mic. Just don't talk. Don't click on your keyboard. Don't put things down. Just let it pick up the ambient noise of your room. Okay,
and
ready?
You don't even have to say 10 seconds quiet. Just clap and we'll be quiet for 10 seconds.
I like that better. All right. Clap check. 3, 2, 1. All right.
The one person who couldn't make it to 10 seconds.
I made it to 10 seconds. He flipped me off. That was 10 seconds.
I did not. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's interesting. I hear. I saw on a couple of them. Instead of doing clap check, they go 1, 2, 3, and then everybody says 4. And I'm like, huh. I wonder if that makes more sense, but I didn't get with that. Yeah, I like the clap check. Are you
share your screen? Share your screen.
Yes, 1 sec.
All right, drop you guys down here. Drop you guys down here. Yeah. All right. Is everybody ready? Anything we need to talk about pre?
Negative, sir.
There is one thing I wanted to queue up real quick. Hold on 1 second. Notifications. Shit. Where did I put that? I don't even know where I put it.
How's my video look today? I moved my light.
Your light looks a lot better.
Not used so much, but the light is great.
I actually lost my light. We'll talk about it on the show, though. Can you, Thomas, listen to yourself on YouTube? Because when you muck with your volume during the show, it's a bitch to edit that.
All right.
So can you just make sure your volume's good? Or one of us can actually do it. I mean, it doesn't have to be you. I was just thinking.
Okay. No one talk. I'm testing.
You got to talk to test. I mean, you got
Test.
to make
I know.
noise.
I'm waiting. Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, cool. Appreciate that. Yeah, that was. I was normalizing. I was normalizing the tracks, and then as I was editing, because I will typically normalize when I start, and then normalize again when I finish, because I put the bumpers on it. So I normalize it with the bumpers. But I noticed that I normalized it at the start, and then I'm listening to it, and you had dropped off, and then you went good. I mean, you went high, but you were where John and I was. So I had already amplified your stream to put you up with John and I, and then all of a sudden you were over John and I. So I had to like start taking these chunks and reducing them. Not that it was a lot of work, Thomas, but a little appreciation would go a long way. I'm just saying.
I'm very appreciative. Here,
Okay.
Let me focus on you so I can show my appreciation.
Oh, geez. All right. Are we ready to start?
Yeah.
All right. Episode. Where are we at? 299?
209.
You're listening to episode
Looking
209 of PHP Ugly. We record. Shit. John's fucked me up.
Start it over. Burn it to the ground.
Why? It's doing great.
We got
Putting
this.
the ugly in PHP Ugly. Keep going. You got it.
Got this. I'll edit this. It'll be perfect. It'll be the perfect conversation. Your weekly dose of PHP development from a couple of real-world PHP developers. If you're listening to your audio podcast, if you're listening to our audio podcast, we record live weekly, Thursday around 9 p.m. Come join us. You can participate. This is now a participation show. We people are in our chat. You can watch us on just about any platform. Use their chat client, or if you even want to chat with us during the week, you can join us in our Discord, where a lot of our regular listeners hang out. We hang out, and we just kind of carry on a conversation all week long. If you're wondering who I am, I'm Eric, and with me tonight
Hi, Eric.
are my friends John.
I love messing with you.
And I
Just
use
saying.
friend very loosely with him. And
I don't
Thomas.
blame you.
Hello.
How are you guys doing?
I am,
Having fun.
it's been a strange week.
Oh, no kidding. I think I need to get in touch with our intro lady on Fiverr and have her add the whole live broadcast thing. Because I'd like when people tune into the show live and participate and ask questions, because we have no content. I mean, we're just winging this. If people can bring something to the table, it just makes our job a lot easier.
Okay, no, we have content, but some of it got blacklisted because of what happened last week. And then all of a sudden, that's the only news this week.
Yeah, so if you're not a
No,
big
it's
fan of
not.
Laravel, and you know who you are, Steve, this might not be the show for you. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of Laravel talk in this show. Just kind of giving you a heads up.
I want to preface by saying I don't think it's a lot of Laravel talk. I think it's a lot of framework do's and don'ts and personality talk.
Okay, that's fine.
Because I actually, I
Do
can.
we want to
don't
start
have
with
to
that?
I was gonna say we don't have to jump in right there. We've all had weeks that we could talk about.
Yeah, I only
Yeah,
have
I mean-
one actual Laravel problem this week. So
Save it. Save it. Towards the end of the show, we're gonna talk about Laravel. So hang out with us until then. If you don't like it, then turn us.
yes.
I mean, seriously, why put somebody through that, John? Oh my goodness. All right.
I'm sure I'll have a lot more to say in a week or two, because starting next week, I think I'm slated to rewrite my Laravel 5.7 app in 8. I think I was cleared for 2 weeks just to do that. So then I can feel your pain, and then we can talk about it.
Green light there.
That's a
Right.
bit of a crunch. Well,
right,
I do want to clarify our position on Laravel is that we we all use Laravel, and we got some criticism on Twitter.
Well,
We don't all use
let's talk about that later.
Yeah, let's
Calm down.
John.
Okay,
Oh my
okay,
gosh.
okay.
We're gonna get to it, Thomas. Thomas is just excited.
Chomping at the
Thomas is
bit.
excited.
We see that. Calm down. We're good. I've been in testing heaven this week.
All right, Thomas. Let's not talk about Laravel.
Come on.
He did not say vegan heaven. It's okay. You can let him continue.
I do love when I get to do real TDD, when I get to write unit tests. I do like it a lot. I did ask last week about testing specifically in Laravel, and we got some feedback on that.
Don't you love that? Isn't it weird? Like, wait, somebody listened to that show and responded?
Right. But I still have so many questions and so many concerns. I still think models are abused instead of just being a data access point. There's so much functionality put into models that I don't know that should be there. And all of my understanding around unit testing is you don't use a database unless you have to. So if you are testing your data access layer and you want to make sure data persists, you want to use a real database. But when you're testing the rest of your application, you want to limit your database as much as possible to make your tests faster. And the fact that it just feels like people throw models anywhere they want, and then they just say, because the relationships are so easy to get from one piece of data to the next, I feel like it gets abused and makes unit testing harder where you actually have to have a database.
So when you say it gets abused, and we're talking about Laravel models, if you're not familiar with the Laravel framework, it may take some getting caught up here. When you say you feel they get abused, are you referring to how you define the relationships to one model to the other? Are you saying that shouldn't be in the model?
No, not necessarily. Not that. So
okay.
The more I've been using Doctrine as of late, you have this idea of entities, which are really I can't think of this, where you can't change the object. Immutable. They're really immutable objects. I mean, they're mutable, but nothing happens with the database until you call the entity manager. So you really have these objects that you can use within your unit test very easily. Where I feel like Eloquent is it's an active record. So you are just the fact of getting it, you are hitting the database, you are doing so much more work. And when I say abuse, I don't mean the relationship piece. Maybe it's just the way I've seen some models being used, but there's actual processes put into the model itself. So it's not just a database access layer, but it's also a data manipulation layer.
Yeah, that might be an abuse of power there. Because for me, I mean, I typically scope, my model is limited to the data that it's related to, data that relates to, in the scope of that data. So I might put scopes on my model where I might do a certain filter where I'm only looking for admins, or I'm only looking for active clients or something. But I don't do any, okay, that's logic, but I don't do any real logic in my model, if that makes sense.
I think it comes down to you have things, it depends on where you're doing your persistence at, where you're calling save from and all that. If you're using, this is where I think the repository pattern comes into. If you are if you're able to, well, but you're not a fan when it comes to testing. And I think that's where you would really see the benefit. You don't do unit tests.
Just wait, knock me off my hill there, John. Trying to support you, but whatever.
Where I think you would see the most benefit in your repository pattern would be if you were doing unit testing, because you could inject your repository and then you could say, this repository is going to give me back an object and a model but then you can mock that model and not actually have to touch the database to do any of your actual work.
Yep, I do agree with you there.
So that's where my confusion came from. I really feel like the model itself, the Laravel specific model, I think calling it a model is where things get a little murky, because it's really the database access layer at that point really is all it should be focused on. And yes, you can have unit tests around that, but you shouldn't be calling save all over the place in your code. I feel that should be being done through a repository.
I agree with you there as well. I do like that. I like that pattern a lot. How about you, Thomas? How was your week?
Mine.
She's gonna talk about Twitter. Eric, how was your week?
So I realized during our conversation last week, at the end of the episode, that my brilliant way of handling my Laravel Mix issues wasn't in fact brilliant, and I was flushing the manifest every time I ran it and destroying everything. So
that's why it was so slow to run.
No, this was my fix for the performance issue. So I got that fixed, but then today realized that our CDN was not updating to the latest version of the assets when we pushed out. And this is after a solid week of having this thing running in production. Just CSS changes.
Is this part of your build process?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it turns out our CDN doesn't pass through the query variables as part of its caching algorithm. So it just checks the file name and caches the file name. And when we update the CDN, it does not flush the cache for the files. And
that's not uncommon.
It's not uncommon. And it turns out Laravel Mix does not have a method for hashing the file name itself. Laravel Mix only supports adding a random number to the end of the query string.
You want to know my workaround for it? My hacky workaround for it?
What was your workaround?
It's not a mix thing at all, and maybe it should be, but in my templates, I put in, let's say it's style.css. I change it to style underscore an MD5 of the file .css, and then in my Apache rewrite configuration, I look for anything underscore with 32 characters.
Oh,
JPEG CSS. It works because nothing's going to cache a file name. I mean, they'll cache a file name, but
I was actually going to applaud him. I thought that was pretty good.
I started doing that years ago, and we're still doing it.
There are some Laravel Mix plugins that can fix this. I've tried 3 of them, and all 3 of them had their own massive drawbacks. One of them worked perfect, except that it couldn't parse my jQuery stuff. So jQuery.thing.min.version.js. It just couldn't find it couldn't find the file in the file system for some reason.
Interesting.
So I don't know. It threw an error. I'm not a Node guy. I didn't dig deep enough to figure it out. So I tossed that. And I already had a command that was chunking my Webpack up into what I'll say different sites, because we have this one thing that's hosting 10 or 15 different sites. And so I just have it so that it breaks it up and only processes one site at a time, reads the mix manifest into memory, and then finishes by compiling a completed mix manifest out of the total output. And that works really well. And since I'm pulling the mix manifest into memory anyways, I just did a loop over the files in the manifest and renamed them. And then changed the manifest destination to the renamed destination.
But how does that fix your
Caching issue.
template? Yeah, the caching issue. Aren't you still calling a single file? So how does your templates know what file to use?
So with Laravel Mix, when you call the mix command, you give it the intended file name, and Mix returns the endpoint file name. So I have Mix calling app.css, and Laravel Mix returns, hey, app.cs is actually app.513982467.css, and it points it at the CDN and gets that. So the templates, the Blade templates, just say app.css. The Mix file is the one that handles the conversion to the actual endpoint file name.
Huh? How did the templates have to point to a file? How does that work? Or is that just a Laravel thing?
I moved the file and changed the value of the mix manifest to a .md5 version of the file.
So how's that different than what I said I did? But beside the point, I'm still
because
confused.
I'm updating my manifest.
I don't understand the whole manifesting. Your templates point to /something/something.css.
Yes.
/app.css. How does your template then know to change that from app.css to app.md5.css?
Because the mix command in your Blade template, looks up the actual...
Oh, there's a mix command in
the Blade template. Yeah, and that command...
That's what I was missing.
Yeah.
Every time you said mix, I thought you were talking about mix on
the execution.
Line.
No. The mix command in the Blade template looks up the key value pair in the mix manifest.
So is that why you're saying you screwed up by blowing away your manifest?
Right, because I was doing it in chunks, and so every time mix finished, I would have to read the manifest and save it, and then once all of the chunks were complete, I'd have to build out the manifest based off of all of the chunks it had created in that loop.
Gotcha.
So it works. It's still really slow, and I don't like it, but I was shocked and amazed when I pushed it out, and it worked the first time I pushed it out today.
All right. So that's making a lot more sense. You're still doing something similar to what I'm doing. I'm just doing it differently.
Yes, I'm using the mix manifest to find the actual endpoint. And that
right.
allows the cache busting that I needed, and so I'm all set.
Okay. All right. Whew. I was so confused when you shook your head like I was doing something so horribly wrong by putting an MD5 in my file name, and you're doing the same thing.
He's doing the exact same thing.
I'm so confused. Why?
Well, because your way sounds a lot easier, and I spent 5 hours on this today.
Hey, nerds, can we take a moment of appreciation? It is that time of year again, where we have the Major League Baseball playoffs going on, the NBA championship game going on, and NFL going on all at the same time. You can watch all three professional sports on one day of the week.
Thank you, Trump.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Don't go there.
Don't get me started.
We had to thank him for it. He said we had to thank him for it. Anyway, go ahead.
It was interesting last
prayers.
week in our post game show when we were talking was when the news hit that Trump tested positive for COVID. It was crazy how that happened, but everything's fine now. He's a superhuman, and nobody else has anything else to worry about because we all have access to the same medical care.
Let's move on.
All right, yes. So you might notice that my office is a little darker this week. I finally got my little stage 1 of my aquaponic experience going. So I got my little beta fish now, and those lights were actually UV lights designed to help plants grow inside. So I have my little beta fish who's living a happy
inside.
Who has a happy little life in his big
in the
tank
attic
now. Which I discovered I didn't realize beta fish were carnivores. Did you guys know betta fish are carnivores?
Yes.
That's the weirdest thing. They're so small. Like, how can they be a carnivore? I'm like,
Smaller
I'm like
fish.
looking at the food I gotta feed them. Nah. Ugh. Anyways, that's yeah. So he's living in a tank. There, the plants that I have. So the whole idea with aquaponics is that the water goes up into a bed. It filters through plants, which filter out the water. Cleans the water. The water gets oxygen, and it goes back into the tank. So all you have to do, ideally, with the fish is feed it, because he's indoor. Some really nice ones that are outside and have enough bugs can theoretically live on their own. But I've only had this running for like 2 or 3 days, and I went and bought a couple of plants because I was very concerned whether or not the water is going to get filtered. I didn't want the poor little fish to have to struggle for oxygen or anything. So I planted a couple of plants that had roots. So I knew that the water was getting filtered. And then I had one bed that I just put seeds in. That bed is already sprouting little plants. It's crazy. It's only been like 3 or 4 days. So I'm very excited, and I'm already planning on how I'm going to scale that up. I love this stuff. This is cool. A whole little science technology thing. My ultimate goal is to make it completely self-sufficient, where it's outside. I can have solar panels running the pump. So that's the big thing right now, is that I still have to use power for the lights, and I have to use power for the pump. So ideally, I put it outside. It gets natural UV. I put a solar panel on there to run the pump, and all I have to do is feed the fish, in which case I'm going to actually do a little Raspberry Pi experiment to make it feed the fish for me, because I think I can do it. And I'll have a completely self-sufficient system that grows grows vegetables and stuff for me, the stuff you use to cook with, and herbs, and
it's self-sufficient up until he has to go put more fish food into the fish food hopper.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm very excited. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. But
you have been talking about it for years. I can attest to that.
So people get an accurate picture of this. It is about the size of a shoebox.
That's correct.
Currently.
Yeah.
Yes.
Currently, this one.
So I don't want people to think you've like converted a portion of your house into this aquaponic scape.
But that's what people do. I mean, you just get a tub, and you get fish. Like the big,
kick your kids out of the house and use their tub.
Yeah.
The big aquaponic farms even run into the issue of the fish breeding too much and them having too many fish, and so they'll either sell the fish to people who want to buy fish or whatever. I mean, they do like the big like river sort of fish. I don't think I'll ever get to that phase, but yeah, it's fun stuff, man. It's the whole kind of relationship. So what's a symbiotic relationship where one thing depends on the other thing for survival? I'm telling you, man, it's cool. I'm excited. I love this stuff. I love science. When science and technology merge, I love it.
So 2 questions. What is the name of the fish, and what does this have to do with your lighting situation?
I love that you asked that question. He is a blue betta, and I naturally named him Diego. What's up? And the lighting situation is because the lights that I was using in my office for the show were the UV lights that I had to now put on the tank to grow the plants.
You were using UV lights for your
That's what I was going to ask.
How do you think I kept this beautiful tan on my face? We record an hour a week. It wasn't that bad, trust me.
Yeah, next year we'll have the skin cancer episode. I don't know how it happened. I got skin cancer all over my face.
I don't know how I got coronavirus. I've only been hugging people with no mask. Yeah, so I'm excited. That's something else I learned about betta fish. Not only are they carnivores, but they don't like UV. So fortunately, the plants.
So I put UV on them anyway.
The plants are on top of this tank, so the UVs don't actually hit him. But yeah, it's cool.
So the UV light is actually for the plants, not for the fish. Gotcha.
Yeah, for the plants to grow. our resident cartoonist is offering. I believe he's offering to make me a character of Diego the fish.
Don't think that's the way it's
And
going.
I'm very much down for that, Andy. I appreciate. Andy's like, wait, what? No. Oh,
Okay,
so
Thomas.
we're like what 10, 15 minutes in the show. We've already talked about Laravel about a dozen times. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's talk. Let's talk, Thomas. What are you doing, Thomas?
I'm putting the beta fish in here.
Live editing.
There you
See,
go.
This is what you miss out on this when you listen to the audio podcast. You're just gonna do it on all the slides now? Is that the idea? Okay.
No, I'm just putting him on your picture. Well, first off, let's start with the good news. DigitalOcean this week launched their app platform, which is their Heroku type clone.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know this.
And the day they launched this, we got an article from I don't know who, because he didn't put his name on it, about deploying Laravel to DigitalOcean. atymic.dev.
So is this supposed to be like the serverless architecture? Is that?
Yeah, so I believe that this is supposed to be sort of serverless style architecture. It's on the apps tab on the DigitalOcean dashboard. You link it to your GitHub account, and it manages the whole thing, I guess. Like, I haven't played with it.
It actually looks more like a Forge replacement. Because we still use Forge for a couple reasons. One, we want to help support Taylor early. I guess he doesn't need it so much anymore, but it is also pretty convenient as far as managing servers when you do deployments. This looks like it might be similar. Oh yeah, look at that, environmental variables. Did they buy Heroku? Because the command is actually Heroku PHP Apache. How are they using? Wait a minute, you need to help me out here, Thomas. Is this part of Heroku? What's going on here?
I didn't read the whole thing.
Jesus Christ!
It does say it's a Heroku alternative in the space. It's way cheaper than Heroku.
Yeah, $7 for a 256 meg instance and 1 gig of disk.
All right, so this is DigitalOcean's. What's the platform called? Do you even know that?
Apps, just DigitalOcean app platform.
Apps. Okay. Yes, this looks very similar to Heroku. If you have experience with Heroku, as far as everything's set up through the UI, there's no need. I don't see any need yet to actually log into the server. But yeah, it also looks very similar to Forge as well. Actually, this looks pretty cool. We're gonna have to try this out.
Hey, look, there's a big new flag on it in our manage section on DigitalOcean.
Really should log into that more often, I guess, and not manage everything through Forge.
that just proves that our systems run so well that we don't need to log in there very often.
That's true. I'm willing to give DigitalOcean some props here. They're rock solid and very simple to use. This looks pretty damn cool, man. This looks pretty damn cool, I gotta say. Okay, so I should have looked at your cards before the show started, because I think this is something worthy talking about. But this is cool, Thomas. Thanks for bringing this to my attention. I will probably give this a shot.
We'll look at it some this week, or before next episode.
So that's the good Laravel news. The bad Laravel news is that Taylor rage quit Reddit
To be honest, it's probably not a bad move.
No.
He's not. Doesn't really strike me as a Reddit person.
I'm not criticizing that move at all. And then shortly afterwards, he did a sort of a live stream where he just took questions and gave answers. A lot of it revolving around the skeletonization of the app or of the auth stuff in Laravel 8.
The Jetstream and the previously deprecated notice of the old scaffolding UI stuff. So let's talk about that.
Well, he tweeted out.
Well, it actually started before him, right? Didn't it start before him? Some people tweeted their dissatisfaction with Jetstream.
Yes.
And they were rightfully concerned because when they went to the Laravel website, because they were going to use the older version of the auth on the website, it said that was being deprecated, which has a very specific
and
meaning in our
do
world.
not use.
Right. And it has a very specific meaning, and that's alarming. It's alarming to people using Laravel 4 through 7 who still might be using it and saying, wait a minute, the auth system that we've had, it's being deprecated now? Well, I guess it hasn't been that long, but the existing users were concerned. New users who didn't like Jetstream were concerned, and they expressed their dissatisfaction. So,
in the way that the internet knows how to do best.
So this is where I guess I'm missing out a little bit, because I didn't see any criticism that seemed like it was that harsh.
Okay,
I mean, I have opinions on this.
I have links to all of it.
Okay.
The tweet from Taylor was, I had been trying to answer more questions on our Laravel lately to be more involved, but I have decided to delete my account. I can't be part of a quote-unquote community where I'm an quote-unquote arrogant asshole who quote-unquote needs therapy and demands his followers quote-unquote lick his asshole.
Now, were there quotes within quotes within quotes, or was there 3 separate quotes, or was it...
I
need to know...
It's called professionalism in podcasting.
Okay.
Quote-unquote lick my asshole. So, this, of course, stirred up a lot of conversation because people said, well, who's being the asshole here? Who's calling you out and being mean and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And it came down to not handling criticism. Saying, I think you did this wrong. The way people are on the internet, which is that they're just abrasive by default. They can't help it. And he took a lot of umbrage at the claim that he had built an echo chamber for himself. And
I think that's well, I hope that's a regular criticism. If it's not, then he must have a spy in our Slack channel. I mean, there's that option as well. But
well, so
here's
the problem.
Okay.
He, in his video, he directly addressed that and said he has not built an echo chamber. He reads a lot of stuff and he's very involved in the community and doing what they say, and I believe him. However, he also has the habit of blocking people who say things he doesn't like. And the end result of doing that on a regular basis is accidentally creating an echo chamber.
Exactly.
So he may not...
That's a very valid point, Thomas.
He may not believe that he has built an echo chamber, but he has dug himself into a position that is very echoey. And I can understand how that happens. I mean, that this is the internet. I have built myself an echo chamber. My Facebook is absolutely an echo chamber. But I'm not in charge of a project that pushes hundreds of millions of dollars around the internet. And the criticisms that are being launched at him while they may sometimes be insulting or coming from a negative place, are not invalid. There are real issues. And the issues are getting muted in favor of the praise. So that's basically.
I do want to take a small step back, and it's funny to hear you guys talk about him not handling the criticism, where it feels like the two of you kind of took a little criticism a little too far from a friend of ours named Steve. See, I feel like I responded very kindly to him, and you guys were like all over the poor guy. Just saying.
How were we all over the poor guy? I told him he probably made a good decision not to listen to our show. I don't understand.
You rage quit Steve.
We love you, Steve. You know, we're just messing with you. We're just messing. I told you I stopped caring a long time ago. Taylor needs to take a page out of my playbook. So I do want to talk about this a little more. I don't want to spend the whole show on it because clearly Steve doesn't like us talking about Laravel too much. Just kidding, Steve. We like you, Steve. You got some tears to climb before you're up high enough.
So you're a buttery. I mean, come on.
Yeah. You're a long way from Mr. Buttery Crumpets.
Haven't earned your lanyard, your mini lanyard yet.
So stop calling it a mini lanyard. It's a freaking keychain. You're setting that bar way too high. Okay. So back on the Laravel issue, I think you nailed it with the echo chamber analogy, Thomas. He may not feel like he's creating an echo chamber, but he is. I mean, by not listening to criticism, by filtering that stuff out, it's an echo chamber. It's been one of my criticisms of him for a while. I've even told him that so much in DMs, which is probably he referenced it in one of the restraining orders. It's fine, but more so, I think we've had this conversation in our company Slack. Laravel is a big deal to us because a lot of our business is built around the decision to go with Laravel. Now, I say that with the full understanding that if we had to pivot tomorrow, there's nothing I think we've developed that we couldn't pivot off Laravel. So I feel pretty good about that. We use Laravel. We have our reasons behind using Laravel, and I don't have a problem with it. As John says, I'm always defending Laravel. That's apparently my job at DiegoDev, and I'm fine with it. I will say, as us doing that, as professionals doing that, we did put some of our reputation behind Laravel. So when there are major shifts in the framework that causes a disruption in development, that's our reputation on the line to our clients on why we have to make these moves, why we have to make these changes, why they have to pay us 80 hours to change from one auth system to another auth system, for an example. Right? We haven't had to do that yet, but I'm just saying, if you have a professional business where you've staked some of your reputation on the framework, there is a financial reason why people get upset about these decisions. And that's part of the thing.
Yeah, I can absolutely, as part of that, I can absolutely
great.
say I've spent 2 weeks dealing with Laravel Mix because Elixir is no longer part of the ecosystem, and there's no backup plan for that. So 2 weeks of my time is not cheap for my company, and that's a very natural thing for my boss to get upset about.
Yeah. So Buttery's awesome. He's always listening, man. Even when you don't think he's here, he's here. It's crazy.
And Thomas offended him, but that's okay.
So I do know in the open source world, there are people who aren't about the open source message, who are more than happy to be critical of decisions for no reason except for the fact that it inconveniences them. They don't have a professional reason to be upset. They're hobbyists. They just don't think something was right. And I do have a problem with that, but that's just part of the open source world. I mean, you just know that. Now, what I do have a problem with at this stage from Taylor specifically, and I'm okay if this gets to him, and Taylor, if you want to talk about it, you know how to get in touch with me. You've got my lawyer's number. Is that Taylor himself has built a couple of large businesses through the Laravel name. And
which
so
he has every right to do, which is awesome.
It's absolutely. It's his project. This was his project. He created this. He owns it.
To be clear, we're jealous.
Here's the crutch of that issue. This isn't Laravel 3. Hell, this isn't even Laravel 4 anymore. You've marketed this. You've encouraged businesses to build on top of it. Your ecosystem has gotten very large. You need to make some changes with the way you manage things. We've had this discussion in the past around Simver. Simver was not that big of a deal. He refused to do it. He didn't understand the extra anxiety it put on developers trying to keep up with his release cycle and not following Simver. He implemented Simver. Does he follow it to the letter? No. But you know what? Nobody does. PHP Core doesn't follow Simver to the letter. But he's trying. We have a general guideline, a general agreement on how things are being released. He needs to now take the next step. Something Taylor likes to do. He loves the Steve Jobs, I got the next big thing reveal moment. That's fine. For all his businesses, his Forges, his Vapor, his Envoyer, do that. Do your next big thing reveal and get the oohs and ahs that you need. Don't do that with the open source project. I think that would have had this simple step would have helped alleviate a lot of these issues with Jetstream. Now, keep in mind, over the last couple of days, Taylor has acknowledged, okay, I will make some of these components optional in Jetstream. He has validated some of the complaints in just a couple of days. He released Jetstream, coding it in a silo. He wasn't engaging even his close friends, according to him. He wasn't talking to people. He was developing it because he wanted to do a reveal. And you can't do that in an open source project. You have to have transparency. I mean, ideally, you have something like an RFC situation where something is proposed, you have a request for comments, discussions are had, and changes are made. But when you create big changes to a framework like this that has now been adopted by so many people, and you create these changes without sharing, without even giving people a heads up or even any opportunity to give input, guess what? You're going to get criticism.
I mean, you're going to get criticism anyway, no matter what you do. Yeah.
But at least if there had been a RFC process where there had been some documented discussion, he would have a lot more people who I considered bring value to the table backing him, instead of just the same people saying, oh, don't let it get to you, you're awesome, thank you, tweets. It's like, no, Taylor, we discussed this in this thread, Taylor mentioned this was mentioned, we all agree this was a good idea. And it's like, why, I don't know. I just think he could do himself a huge favor. I know it's more to manage.
He's also got all the fanboys coming up and defending, like, Taylor's giving you all this stuff for free. How dare you criticize? And there's criticism, and then there's going too far, saying all he wants is people to lick his asshole, right?
Jesus,
If-
can we
if you're
stop
that-
using that phrase? That is not
Hey.
going to be the title of the show.
If you're that
Yeah,
person,
now it is.
you have problems. If you're that person, you have problems. But having legitimate criticisms about a framework is okay. To say this shouldn't be this way, this shouldn't have been deprecated. Why has it been deprecated? Is not going too far. It's asking a very legitimate question.
Okay, so I wanna take where we're at, and I want to step it away from Taylor and Laravel, because this isn't an issue that's exclusive to Laravel or to Taylor.
Oh,
This
of course
is,
not.
This is something that all of the open source projects have to deal with. And I think the best example of dealing with this is Symfony.
Composer.
Symfony. How do I mute him?
Well, I didn't even hear what he said.
I said composer.
I think the best example here is Symfony. Now you got me doing it. Thank you
Thanks
very
for
much.
agreeing with me. I appreciate it.
Symfony, the whole framework is broken up into components. So when something new is added, it's added as a component. The core of the framework, which I guess you could call the
Engine?
AI, or the AD, the active loader, the DI, the dependency injector. Shut up.
So confused.
I would say that the way that you start with a framework like this is you've got your dependency injector component, and from there you add components onto it. And to the point where Symfony has a documentation guide on different builds. There's the small build, the big build, the robust, the API build, the fixtures.
Everything but the kitchen sink build.
Right. So that's great. That's perfect. And Laravel's already broken out in this way with the Illuminate components. But why we're jumping versions every single iteration of anything is just a pattern that Taylor is using. The other thing is Symfony is using an RFC and I don't know what you would call it, a voting group for changes.
Okay. I mean, that's kind of what Core does as well. They have an open RFC stage,
Right.
but only certain members can actually vote on things. Yeah.
So Symfony has a board, and when something is approved and merged in, it's not John's fault that this fucking thing is here now and we have to fucking deal with it. This thing was introduced, approved by the community, passed by the board, and merged into a specific version. So it's gone through these steps where the criticism doesn't have a place to go because it's already asked for criticism openly. When you launch a new product or a new project out of the blue, all the criticism is going to come at the one person who launched it the day they launch it.
Well, and bringing it back to Laravel, the Jetstream situation, some of the criticism wasn't even criticism; it was a misunderstanding. And again, with an RFC process in distributing that education beforehand, I think it could have nipped that misunderstanding in the bud before it started to propagate.
Now,
And everybody just kind of thought, okay, well, this is what I have to use now.
and distributing the
You don't have to
authority.
use this.
The thing about distributing the authority is that people are human, and when they get attacked for something that they've made, not something that they're supporting, but something that they've made, it's a huge insult. It can feel really personal. It can feel really terrible.
Absolutely.
And as people who I think the three of us are very focused on mental health in the development community, we have to acknowledge that the way he's doing things is bad for his own mental health.
Keep my little notebook right next to me.
Yeah,
all the time. Man.
So the
And ready to go.
recommendations that we're making as far as the process are to save him this kind of blow up for when a new thing gets released or a new patch comes out. Because you look at other people who've had to deal with this for, let's say, 30 years, Linus Torvald, people hate him. He is absolutely a genius, But when he is attacked, he fights back real brutal, real hard. And that's the result of years and years and years of being the sole, BDFL for the Linux kernel.
It's interesting you bring up the whole mental health aspect there separately from Laravel. If we're ready to move on, do you have more you want to talk about there? Don't want to spend the entire show.
No, I think we've
on Laravel.
One of the criticisms of this podcast is that we've covered the Laravel issues repeatedly. I don't want to rehash the things we've already said, but I think the things we've said are still valid.
I think, especially you two, have done a fantastic job of trying to not make it personal, not make it necessarily specifically about Taylor. I loved Eric's response about, we answer to clients. We push for Laravel, and then when Laravel all of a sudden makes this big change and we have to defend our decision is huge. So you both make great points.
Yeah, and we're not even Laravel certified developers.
You may not be. Going to the mental, not illness, mental
health
aspect of it. There was an interesting tweet out there. Somebody said, "Oh my gosh, I suck." And now I got to remember who said this. I forget how I came across this whole thread, but I guess Iris Klassen tweeted out, "Oh my gosh, I suck." And then there's a whole back and forth. And then the question was, how much feedback should you give on a PR? And I think part of that comes down to some people, when doing code reviews, they want to help as much as they can. And I think I'm guilty of this as well, and would love, feedback from especially our developers. Where is that breaking point? When you're do you guys do a lot of code review? I guess I should start
This
there.
is a stupid topic. We should keep going.
I work with you, John. God damn it. Why are you
Eric,
asking me questions?
Because I hate when I feel like I'm just monologuing a whole story, so I thought I'd ask a question.
I can take this up. I think it can go both ways, because I can get very frustrated being nice to my subordinate developers. We're pushing out a lot of SAS technology, a lot of the ES6JS technology, and I want to say, listen, you're writing code for CSS into templates. You need to put this into a universal SAS file. You need to make sure all the pages have the same definition because they use the same files and imports. You need to, I want to go off on them sometimes, but I don't do that. And I don't know if that makes me a good senior developer or a bad senior developer, but I generally try to say, well, because of the change we made 3 months ago, you need to make double sure that this gets put into the SAS file instead of into the Blade template. If you're going to test it there, sure, but you need to move it before your final commit. Now, this is also an effect of me not doing code reviews. I see this stuff when I bump into it later when I'm trying to fix something else.
See, I'm a huge fan of code reviews, and I understand where they were coming from when it comes to getting too much feedback and feeling like, oh my gosh, I suck. Mm-hmm. I feel that often where, God, we've gone back and forth on this 15 times and it's still not good.
I've got that too.
And it's frustrating, but at the end of the day, it does make me, I feel it makes me a better developer in understanding things like why they are being asked. Hey, you could do this. You should do this. You have to do that.
Well, my first.
So let me ask a question though. Let me ask you both a question. With that exact statement fresh in your mind, John, what is a code review to you? Because this is where I struggle, because when I'm doing code reviews, I catch myself all the time saying, well, yeah, that works, but that's not how I want it done. I would do it this way. And where is that line to you? Like, I actually just did a code review this week with one of our developers where they did something. I'm pretty sure that had they reached out, we could have fixed it, but they were doing it the wrong way. It wasn't working, and decided to take another approach. So in the code review, I didn't agree with his second approach. I still wanted to rewind the code and say, okay, take another crack at this, do it this way, and because this is how I want it done. But then I get caught up like, well, this is working. It's client work. They're paying us by the hour. Well, they don't pay us by the hour, but we're paying our developers by the hour. Do I really want to pay this person to redo functional code again just because it's not exactly the way I want it? And I'm not even sure if it's going to be a problem. So what are your rules with that?
So one thing I learned by following this thread, I don't know if you're familiar with Gitmoji. I use it often in my titles for PRs, like a little bug, stupid little emoji, but it helps identify things. And there's actually from GitHub a PR comment emojis as well. And we've been doing this a long time on the projects I'm on. Is there's various levels of comments. There's you could do this. Like if all of the comments are you could do this, it gets approved. Like no big deal. You don't need to change it. But here are some things to think about. There's you should. Again, if there are a couple of shoulds that really aren't going to stop the PR from moving forward, it's, hey, you should do this, but I'm going to approve it. Maybe it's something to refactor later. And then there's you must. You must make this change because it's functionally wrong or it doesn't follow our style guide. Whatever the case is, there's certain things that are blocking. And as a reviewer, you have to know where that line is. So when you're reviewing code that works, maybe it's not the way you would do it, but coding is an art form. So it's not science. It's not always going to be your way.
Literally
so if it
called
works,
computer science. I'm just going to point that
out. True. They made a mistake. It should have been computer art form. So when you're doing a review, if it's not just the way you would do it, I would make that hey, I would have done it this way, but this works, so I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to share. I'm just going to share my thought process, but this works. I'm not going to stop it. I'm not going to make you redo it. If there's testing behind it, definitely not going to stop it. Like it's tested, as long as you're testing edge cases, which is a big deal to me.
I like that idea. I like that idea a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That's the big thing. When I'm looking at tests, I'm trying to make sure you're catching your edge cases. I reviewed one recently this is where the whole Laravel database thing came in. You doing testing is because you're calling DB the DB facade, it makes it so hard to test specific code. And I'm like, you're trying to do a transaction here, but you're doing a rollback in the middle of a for each loop. That's not going to work. So it's just that whole thing is knowing what that line is, what you have to change versus trying to teach somebody your thought process. A lot of my reviews come down to, I would try to abstract this out of this place because one, it's overcomplicated as it is, making it very hard to test. And if you move this over here, you can make it much more testable. And here's what I would do to test it. So
I like that idea a lot. I'm just already thinking in my head, like a rule of thumb, if something's done in a manner that I wouldn't do it, as long as there's testing to support it, where in the future, if I do want to refactor and implement my way, and then I can see through testing whether or not it still works or doesn't work. That's huge. I love that suggestion. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So we'll include in the show notes, but on GitHub there's a PR comment emojis. with just 4 simple emojis. A question mark for, I'm asking a question, but it's not blocking. Maybe I'm just more curious about the way you've done things. There's a little art, like an art canvas thing, where you're saying that you could change these things, but again, it's not blocking. Maybe a simple refactor would be great, but if we really need to get this out the door, get it out the door, maybe think about coming back for it. Then you have your blocking changes. Again, what we talked about. This just doesn't do what you think it does. You have to change something. And then the one that people often forget to do, and I've been trying to make a point of it, some sort of great job here comment. And their recommendation is the cat with the heart eyes. I like what you did here.
This is a terrible recommendation.
This was a stop it. This was a creative solution to this. Not being condescending, but this was creative. I like what you did here. This was simpler than I thought. Or thank you for all of this work. There's complimenting someone's work. It goes a long way.
I agree. I got a compliment last week that it was just like, "Hey, good job," and I thought I had royally screwed up because of how badly this deployment went, and it took an entire day. But getting the good job at the end of it was like, okay, I'm glad he understands. I'm glad it's appreciated.
I like. Buttery says in your code reviews are great. If there are well-documented guidelines for what will be reviewed, I think this is another card I have in here. The 10 tips for better pull requests, and I think I've brought this up on the show before. But if your pull request is 50 files, you haven't. There's something more than likely wrong. Not necessarily. There are times where you're writing a huge feature, but keeping your pull requests focused. If you have a pull request with 50 files and 3 of them have just white space changes where your code reformatted, your editor took your tabs out and changed them to spaces, that doesn't belong in that pull. That doesn't belong in that pull request.
I do it all the time.
That should be a separate pull request. You're refactoring something or renaming variables or whatever the case may be. That doesn't belong in a feature pull request. So there's a 10 tips for better pull requests. I liked reading that. Keeping, if I'm reviewing a pull request that is simple refactoring, like I literally use my IDE to refactor a file, there's very little review that needs to be done, especially if the comment in the pull request says, hey, here's all I've done. I went into this file, I used PHP Storm to refactor it, to clean up the formatting. All I'm going to do is try and scan it for any potential errors, but I'm not going to spend 5 minutes on it. Versus a feature where I may spend an hour looking over the entire PR for problems. But like Buttery said, having well documented, especially a style guide, variable name guide, like we're going to use underscores, or we're going to use camel case, or we're going to use snake case. As long as everyone's on the same page where my code review makes sense. Like if I'm going to criticize you on your variable name, that's an issue. But if I can say, hey, this variable name just doesn't follow our style guide, that's completely different.
Yeah. All right, you guys know what time it is.
Thank you, patrons.
Thank you to our Patreons. Patrons on Patreon. I screwed it up. Leave me alone. I'm trying to manage all these camera angles.
Josh says in chat he feels guilty. He says he's not active on Patreon anymore, and to take him off the list. He doesn't want to be associated with the show or something like that. I might be paraphrasing. I don't know exactly. But I just let him know. We still want to show we appreciate him. Or them. I actually don't know if Yasha is male or female. So thank you. Thank you
I'll go ahead and
for your past support.
Delete that right now.
I'm gonna do it live.
Just
we'll take
edit
care
you
of you
right
Yasha.
out of there.
You want off the list? We'll take you off
Fine.
the list.
I'll just put a strike
So,
through. So your
So
name stays up in shame.
You know what? I love that idea. We should do that. We should just like put lines for the people who bailed on us.
Oh God. Well, then now they're gonna just bail on listening to us too. No, thank you to our Patreons, patreon.com/phpugly. We really do appreciate it. I hope everyone's gotten their lanyards.
Jesus Christ, it's a keychain.
I want to. All right.
And
I want to know about this. Good.
I think we're gonna close it up with the Hacktoberfest fail.
That's what I was gonna say. I want to know about this.
I had something I wanted to ask you guys really fast. It should be quick.
Go for it. I didn't say we were closing up. Thomas did. I want to know about the Hacktoberfest fails, but I also want to know what you're going to ask.
So, quick update on my Pop OS journey, because I get a lot of feedback on that. A lot of people like me talking about the Pop OS. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot to talk about. It's kind of been a non-event. I'm using it every day. I haven't stopped using it.
Do I make the switch or not? That's the question.
I don't know. You're a pretty picky developer. It's hard because I enjoy it. I don't know. It's a hard call. So I still have.
My main reason is just around Docker and the speed of accessing things.
So that's actually my question for you guys. So anyways, for the most part, it's a non-event. My tool chain is working. I'm still getting used to the new database tool. I think that's the only tool I had to change. I can't think of any other tool that I wasn't able to port over. Even things like 1Password, which John and I use, and then LastPass, which we use in the company. I'm still able to use. I do get that feeling like LastPass seems to work a little better, but I'm giving 1Pass another go, and it seems to be working okay as far as integration. So I do have this outstanding issue with the POS audio that at this point I think I'm going to have to open up a ticket with System 76 on, because it is getting majorly annoying. I've got like certain applications now that won't even respect the system setting on what output it should be channeling through. It's absolutely annoying, and I'm getting tired of it. But besides that, there's just the Docker thing. So back to the Docker thing. Freaking Docker has just been such a pleasure to work with. I had made the commitment of not putting any system tools like PHP, MySQL, Postgres, CouchDB on my actual system and only using them through Docker. That, for the most part, is working. The one caveat I'm having, and this is where I'm asking, I'm just curious if you guys have any thoughts on this. For my development environment, I was using Devilbox, which is a stack of a bunch of Docker containers for my toolchain. It has PHP, it has MySQL, it has Postgres, it has Mailhog. It has pretty much everything I need. Elasticsearch. It pretty much has everything I need. But I am having an issue where if I want to spin up, so with our projects, we might have a certain version of PHP, but we have the Docker container in the project. So I'll want to spin up that Docker container for that project. And I'm having to shut down my Devilbox a lot. Now, the one thing that I don't necessarily need to shut down that I'm finding that I kind of want is MySQL. So I'm debating whether or not I have MySQL be its own Docker container and just always run it, unless I have to, for some reason, run MySQL on another project for any particular reason for the version.
But why? I'm confused.
Why what?
Why do you want a central MySQL container versus one per project?
I'm glad you asked me that. Because I like writing a lot of things, and I typically use MySQL as the data store, and I even have some external stuff that will talk to my system to record stuff to a database. So having a always running database on my system is easy. It's just less to think about.
Why not? Why would you not have one for your system that ports 3306 to an internal container for those things, but then have your projects on, like, you don't need access from your local machine on 3306. It could be any other port.
Yeah, that's valid. I thought about doing that, like running my whatever you call primary database on a different port and just leaving that as a Docker container always running. Yeah, maybe that's what I'll do. But yeah, for the most part,
are you using Docker Compose?
Yeah, Docker Compose. Yeah,
I would just emulate whatever your server environment is per project.
We are, and that's where I'm concerned that
welcome to the show.
That's where I'm concerned with what you're suggesting is basically stopping the MySQL server per project and having it all on a central one where there's no need to do that.
Well, so there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, rarely is the data store a factor. So if I ran a MySQL 8, 99% of our projects are new projects are on MySQL 8, but even the older ones, it's just not that big of a factor. Now, what I run into a lot, and John, you might get this as well, is I'm working with a client. I'm working on a client project, and I'm doing something, and then one of our developers in a completely different project will ask me a question about the database. So either I have to then spin down the stuff I'm working on, spin up that project just to get access to the database, or I have a centralized database that I'm always using, and everything's talking.
Why do you have to spin down the one you're on versus just spin them both up?
Well, then I'm on this whole port management system, right, where each one is using a different port. I don't feel like
that should be in your env file. For your Docker Compose, that should be in your env file. So it's a one-time change. You set it, you put it into whatever your MySQL GUI is, saying, okay, for this project, it's going to be port 3307 now, and then you don't think about it again. It's a one-time thing, and you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I don't know if I like that one. I guess, but then you got to do the same thing to the web server. You got to do the same thing to any other services you're running. Yeah. It's kind of and the web server is a pain in the ass because then you do have to remember it in the URL. So I don't know that. I just like having if somebody messages me and says, "Hey, in this project on this table, we have these columns. What's this column mean?" And me being able to go to a database without having to stop what I'm doing, spin up the container, and look at it. I don't know. It just
I mean, it
sounds like a workflow issue.
You're a workflow issue.
It's a fair point. If you can make it work, more power to you. I mean, there's nothing stopping you. The hard part, doesn't the networking become an issue between all the projects? How does that work? Honestly, I've never tried it.
Well, that was actually going to be one of my questions for you, John, because I remember you had mentioned to me how you could configure a Docker container to use the native system service by some sort of address for the Mac. Mm-hmm. I was going to see if there was something like that for Linux, because on my system, like you said, if I just put it on a different port, another Docker container just needs to talk to my system on that port. It doesn't have to realize it's talking to another Docker container.
Okay, just hear me out. A VM for each project with a constantly running Docker container, so you just switch between your VMs.
That's what I'm proposing. Well, that's what I originally proposed. John actually had, I thought, a better idea, which was running centralized MySQL on a different port, so that if my project has its own version, it could spin up easily.
If there's a kernel programmer,
I didn't realize this was going to be such a big conversation.
If there's a kernel programmer out there, a Linux kernel programmer, the ability to shortcut ports in a host file, along with the host names, would just be the best thing ever.
I mean, it kind of is already from the sense that it will. You can create a .env file for Docker Compose, and then when you expose the port, you just reference that .env file of what port you want it exposed to. But having a way to dynamically do it, like just find a freaking port for me and then handle that request or something. I don't know. I mean, like with Vagrant,
Make it sound so easy.
Which Vagrant is a complete VM, so it's a different technology. But with Vagrant, it spins up everything on its normal ports locally, and then you can expose those, but you're addressing it like it's a remote server, so it has its own IP, and then you have to address it on that port. So,
well, I have
technology.
I have a server that's running 3 different Docker web servers on it, and if I could get a subdomain that pointed to one or the other, that would save my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of I would love that, where I can say, okay, this Docker container lives on
on this host name. Yeah, if there was a I know you can do this in Apache and Nginx, of course. This is just subdomain records and stuff like that. But if you could have a Docker file that did port forwarding for web services, I would be the happiest person.
But you do, don't you? I mean, isn't that what that expose command is? Expose port forwards to your...
No, but by host name.
He doesn't want to go to port 81. He wants
right.
port 80 and 443 to always work.
I want domain 1 to point to port 8080 and domain 2 to point to port 8081, so that...
I see what you're saying. Yeah, so it's transparent to you when you're using it.
Yeah, because I can't always remember what port piracy program X is on.
That was a much bigger conversation.
Once you type it in your browser once, it remembers. I don't understand what the problem is.
I have lots of different browsers.
It remembers what? Your address is always the same except for the port number. What are you talking about? It's always 127.0.0.1 port, whatever.
No, because I manage these services from around my house.
No, I'm agreeing with you, Thomas.
Anyways,
like I use domain names for my projects, not 127.0.0.1.
So you create an Etsy host file for each one? I mean, that's what I do as well. But
I have in the past. Now for a team, it's actually part of the actual DNS setup.
Mm.
So local.
Okay, I do want to get to Hacktoberfest. I know we're running long, so I do want to get to Hacktoberfest.
Well, you're going to try. I'm not going to let you because you're going to try to absolve yourself really, really early on. There was a recent problem with Hacktoberfest. A YouTuber had said, "Hey, if you want a free T-shirt, here's how you game the system." Now, if this sounds familiar,
what a jerk!
It's exactly what Eric had told people to do 2 years ago.
Okay, in my defense, it was our own repo. I wasn't telling him to go to open source repos and do this. It was our own repo, but
it was our own repo, but it was gaming the system. Now, this YouTube video took off, and people just started jumping into every open source project they could find and submitting basically white space changes as PRs to these repos. And the whole Hacktoberfest thing got put on halt. Everyone said, "Stop the gears. This is not how you're supposed to support open source development." The T-shirt is a bonus for people who want a T-shirt, but the T-shirt is not a prize for tricking us. So Hacktoberfest has come out and said, well, okay, these are the new official rules. You don't get a T-shirt for just submitting a PR to a random open source project. They have to be cooperating with Hacktoberfest, so it has to be a Hacktoberfest tagged project. It has to be a PR that's tagged with one of the requests for work that we accept, and the PR has to be accepted. And we're sorry that we have to do this, but the internet sucks.
Actually, I think it doesn't have the request doesn't have to be tagged Oktoberfest, but
not the request, but
the,
it has to be one of the tags that Hacktoberfest acknowledges as beneficial work. So we've looked at this in the past,
and that can happen on the merge as well. It doesn't have to be the actual request,
right?
But and what's also happening is that DigitalOcean put a system in place to allow open source contributors to mark, which is just again a tag, a label, mark PRs as spam, and DigitalOcean is now watching those submitters, and I assume you're going to be put on a block list or something. I'm not sure, but yeah. So you don't want to mess around with them right now. They're not happy, and
no,
I think DigitalOcean handled it very well. I mean, they implemented a system that was easy to manage, that didn't really intrude in any of the workflows, and gave the maintainers of these projects an avenue to participate or to shut them down. And I mean, it doesn't stop people from creating the PRs, which is kind of unfortunate, but whatever.
Hey, NeoVim is one of your projects. You can go create a pull request there.
Yeah, and you can go to...
Maybe I'll just run it through my IDE and let it line up all the brackets and everything.
You can go to the Hacktoberfest page and get a list of good first pull requests sorted by language, so it's whatever language you're comfortable with. Documentation specific requests, language translation. So it's not like this stuff is still out of reach. They haven't made it impossible by any means to get your t-shirt. They just want you to get your t-shirt in a way that contributes to the community and to the open source projects that they're intended to be helping. So that's the new rules for Hacktoberfest. We apologize profusely for Eric's behavior in the past. We knew it was wrong then. We know it's wrong now.
We didn't know our mic was hot when we said it.
But there were projects getting hundreds and hundreds of pull requests for just spaces in the docs. So yeah, don't do that.
Too long. Stop talking about it. That's it. We're done. This is episode 209. The music's playing. We're grooving. We're done. We're in the books. Thank you for listening. Thank you, our Patreons. We appreciate everything. I've been your host, Eric.
I'm John.
I'm Tom. Keep it ugly.
I am sweating my ass off. Let me turn the fan on real fast. I got something to tell you, Thomas.
Did you see your picture?
I thought you said it was animated.
I did animate it earlier.
Yeah.
We don't see anything but a gray box right now. You're not sharing.
Wait, there's a beta fish over your face. What do you mean you don't see it?
What? Where's our beta fish?
On the right-hand side.
God.
It's Diego.
Yeah, where did I go? Yeah. There, we got a thumbnail.
I can animate him though. I can let me pull this back up. I can make him hang out with John or me.
I don't know if bragging is actually constitutes animating, but
Wow, you haven't taken any animation courses then, because that's literally all it is.
Hey, I feel with my buddy.
He said
Andy
literally
Wilson
all
does.
there is.
No, it's tweening. It's all Flash animation is all about tweening.
That's you are right. I remember I learned that. So again, my buddy Andy, the guy that did our artwork, I showed him Flash. I'm like, yeah, it does this thing called tweening, and he's old school comics. I mean, he used to do things on Cartoon
Zencaster's
Network.
still running.
That's fine. He's Zencaster. And I remember telling him about tweening and how excited he got about it. I'm like, why are you excited about something called tweening? And then he explained to me what it was. I'm like, yeah, that's what Flash does. It just like you have the leg here, you say you want it there, and it just moves it for you.
Right.
He's like, yeah, that's not easy.
Tweening and easing, baby.
No, it's very
the easiest thing in the world.
So I didn't want to get into it when we were talking about the System 76 because we were already running way way long. There he is, Andy. Yeah, I used to do Adult Swim shows. Yeah, and Flash. Hey, I think Andy, you did Scooby Doo, right? Didn't you do Scooby Doo, or what? Some of the ones you did, I forget. I mean, they were A-list cartoons. I remember. I don't remember which ones exactly he did.
I mean,
We'll wait for him
Scooby Doo
to-
wasn't on Adult Swim, was it?
I'm pretty sure he did Scooby Doo. On the I thought he worked on the Cartoon Network as well, but maybe I'm wrong. He's in there. It'll catch up. He'll tell us. But Thomas and John, if you care, I
don't.
played a Steam game on my Linux system that was for Windows. Of course, it was Batman.
Which one?
And the latest one.
Arkham Origins?
Yes, I think that was the one.
Oh no, Arkham City was the latest one.
I would have to.
Asylum
Well, you
Origins
can actually
City.
You can log into Steam and see it because you played it. It said your friend PDF has played this. This many
PFY.
hours.
I'm not PDF. Jesus Christ.
Let's see. Yeah, he did Scooby Doo, Flintstones, Jetsons. He did a bunch of bumpers. I remember. Very cool stuff. So, anyways, the graphics were just so smooth, and playing it was so smooth. Now, I learned very quickly. Kinesis keyboard, not a gaming keyboard. Very painful to play with the Kinesis keyboard.
No kidding.
Holy crap! But I did dig up my controller. I have a Steam controller, and it worked. I mean, it worked.
Speaking of Steam, oh my God, you just reminded me. Okay, so I have you on Steam.
Mm-hmm.
You know who else I have on Steam?
No.
Chipper.
What I know?
Taylor.
Chipper.
Yeah.
Oh. So.
Jarvis.
Not
Jarvis Badgley.
Yeah, not for the show. If you're gonna say what I think you're gonna say.
Yeah,
Not
let's
for on
hold
air.
that. I think we know what it is you're going to say, and it's not. Yeah, let's not share that.
Okay.
But yeah. So now, I think so. Here's the weird thing: when I plugged in the Steam controller, it comes with a dongle,
Yeah.
so it's wireless, and it worked fine. But then it insisted that it had an update. I updated it and physically plug it in for it to work. I don't know what happened there.
You should be able to unplug it and then plug it back in. Like, you should only have to plug it in.
I tried several times, but I will say with it plugged in. So here's the weird thing: with it plugged in, I played Batman for about an hour, and my whole system crashed. And I'm like, whoa!
Batman's a tall order.
So I turn off my system and I turn it back on. And I'm not a big gamer, so my Steam controller is still plugged in. I'm not playing Steam anymore. Steam isn't even running because I had to reboot. Steam's not running. It doesn't auto start or anything like that. And about an hour and a half later, my system crashes again. I'm like, what the fuck? Like this system has been rock solid, since I got it, and now all of a sudden it's flaking out. So I don't know why I thought about it, but I unplugged the Steam controller, rebooted my system, everything's fine. It's been running nonstop. I haven't rebooted it since. I think I did this after the show last week, or it was on Friday. So now I'm afraid to hook my Steam controller back up to it because...
Well, don't use the Steam controller.
I can't use the keyboard?
No, you use an Xbox One controller.
Oh, I got a PlayStation controller. Maybe I use a PlayStation.
Do you have Bluetooth on the machine?
Yeah.
Yeah, then you're fine. Bluetooth or if you get an adapter for 2.4 gig.
This is supposed to work on Bluetooth as well, and it wasn't. It says that it doesn't recommend using Bluetooth. It'd rather you use the dongle.
Right.
But I couldn't get the Bluetooth to work
Don't-
on here, but I did.
Don't use the
about
Steam.
place-
Yeah, don't use the Steam controller. It's a dead product now.
All right, that's a
It's-
good idea. I'll look for my now. Does it matter if it's a PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 4?
PlayStation 3 and 4 are both Bluetooth. And
I'll look for- 'cause
PlayStation 5
I have a
and Xbox
I have a
One.
PlayStation. I have a PlayStation. Wait, what's the latest one? The 5?
Yeah. But you're not going to get one of those.
Okay, so I have a 4 now, and I have a 3, I think, in my garage. So if I can find the controller for the 3, I'll try to use that.
Yeah, and you'll have to
I
you'll have to
did,
look up.
however-
I have a Nintendo controller. Will that work?
Yeah. The
I have one of
Switch.
those,
Like an original Nintendo from 1990s.
Yeah, I can get you a USB interface for it.
The
It
other
was
thing I
just
did-
serial with a bad pin out on it. That's all it was.
The other thing I did on the Pop is I switched my keyboard layout to Windows, and oh my God, has it made a difference with my typing? So, yes, that was a huge. And the cool thing about the Kinesis is, if you remember, I reassigned this key right here, which is the delete key.
Mhm.
I reassigned that to the Apple key. That assignment is still active. So even though, and that's actually the Apple key I was primarily, I would use primarily when I was on Apple, was because it was under my thumb. So I actually have the best of both worlds now. When I go to my Apple screen, which I'm actually not doing that frequently, it constantly goes into screensaver mode because I'm not on it. I still have my Apple key, and when I'm on my Pop OS system, I have better access to the control keys, and life has gotten so much better. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Thanks for listening to me rant.
All right, I think
That's the post.
I'm done
posting.
too. I'm going to go offline now. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, Andy, for hanging out. Thank you, Buttery.
Yasha,
Yasha.
Anybody else pop in there? Yasha,
Roger,
Andy.
Roger AA,
Roger. Hey, man.
Andrew
You made it.
Wilson,
We're happy you were with us. That's Andy. Yeah.
Andy Wilson.
He's the guy that he's the guy that did our logo.
Yes.
He's one of the coolest, best people I know. So, miss you, Andy, man. I miss playing ball with you, brother. So, all right. Hey, your A's. I didn't see if they won today, but Andy was actually working. He's always working with Major League Baseball, and he recently was working with Oakland.
Frank,
Frankie, what's up, buddy?
thank you.
He
And
had one of the coolest jobs last year with Major League Baseball too.
I doubt she's listening, but Carolyn, if you do hear this, we love you so
Yeah.
much, and please take care.
She's not listening. You kidding me?
Well, still, got to give the shout out. I feel so awful.
And Steve. Thank you, Steve.
Steve, if you're listening,
If you made it to the end of this one, the content that won't be on the podcast, if you decided to watch live tonight for some reason and got all the way through, let's see, an hour and 27 minutes, God help you.
yeah, I was actually watching that game, Andy. I don't know why I didn't remember that. And yeah, they lost the series. You're right. Looks like so did the Padres. So whatever, man. Damn
Damn,
Astros.
2020.
I don't-
All right, thank you, everybody. Good night.
All right.